It is also down to the Australian government to make sure that there is an effective import regulation that can effectively screen for this illegal fishing associated products, but also products that are associated with forced labor and human trafficking as well. And there are a number of examples from around the world, from the EU, from the United States as well, where there are these trade mechanisms that have been incredibly effective at preventing those kinds of products from entering the seafood market.
Yes, well, you mentioned slave labour, and I think there's evidence in your report that something very close to slave labour is taking place on these vessels, that non-Chinese staff are brought on board, or crew are brought on board, and they're treated in the most horrendous manner in some cases. Tell me about it.
Well, yes. So in most cases, these distant water fleets are using predominantly migrant workers, and the vast majority come from Indonesia, and also a smaller proportion come from the Philippines. So we have a team of investigators that work all across Indonesia, interviewing returnees and survivors who have actually worked on Chinese fishing vessels. And so, yes, our ever-widening net report did use these interviews, and we were able to understand the severity and the scale of the abuses on board these Chinese distant water fishing vessels. In a number of these cases, these workers were being subject to horrific physical abuse, and even in some cases, sexual abuse as well. And we were even hearing reports of fishers being locked into the deep freezers on board these vessels, and almost dying from that kind of exposure. Workers not being given proper safety equipment and working equipment, so not being given gloves to handle this incredibly frozen tuna, and actually developing frostbite, having those fingers amputated, and workers just reporting being beaten by senior crew for making minor mistakes even. So if a fish got loose off the line, for example, that might warrant the senior crew actually physically abusing that worker for that mistake. And so we've recovered a litany of these kinds of abuses and horrific stories from these fishers who return to Indonesia. And one of the most distressing things as well is that they return to Indonesia, and often they haven't received a single cent for their work on board that vessel. And so they might come back after 2 years of having horrific physical abuse inflicted upon them, verbal abuse on a daily basis, and then they have nothing to show for it. And it's very, very difficult for these workers to actually get compensation and try to take their cases to court as well.